Welcome to tonight's meeting in the Port Phillip City Council. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of this land, the people of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continued relationship to this land. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid style and is streamed via Council's webcast page and Facebook Live. Streams and recordings of Council meetings are copyrighted and cannot be altered, reproduced, or republished without the permission of Council. If we experience any technical difficulties this evening, we will adjourn the meeting for a short time to resolve the issue. I remind attendees that any member of the public addressing Council must extend due courtesy and respect to Council and the processes under which it operates, and must take direction from the Chair whenever called on to do so. Speakers must remain respectful, and questions or statements must not be defamatory, offensive, or objectionable, aimed at embarrassing a councillor or a member of Council staff, or relate to a matter outside the powers of Council. The first item will be request to attend by electronic means. I've been advised by the CEO that we have not received any requests from councillors to attend electronically. So on to apologies. I see we're all here, so there are no apologies. Next will be minutes of the previous meetings. Councillors, the minutes of the council meeting of 18 October 2023 have been circulated. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? If not, can I have a motion to confirm these minutes? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Nyagwi. Thank you. Let's put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. On to declarations of conflict of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting? Councillor Nyagwi.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm declaring a general conflict of interest in relation to item 12.1, Love My Place 2023-24 recommendations for the 2023-24 grants projects. I have a close association with one of the grant applicants, and I will leave the meeting when the item is considered.
All right. Thank you. Any other conflicts of interest? If not, we'll move on to public question time and submissions. Under Council's governance rules, questions can only be asked about items not on the agenda. Therefore, if you're speaking to an agenda item tonight, please note I will not refer these to an officer for a response. However, a councillor may wish to take up a question on your behalf when the item is considered. We actually don't have anybody virtual tonight. I think that's a long time we haven't had that. So everyone's in person tonight. I will call up your name, and when you can come up, sit in the chair, please. The microphone should already be on. Can someone confirm the lights there? Thank you. Please state your name and suburb, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you. So microphone's ready to go. I call upon Conrad Winkler submitting a question to Council. Hello, Conrad.
Hello.
Now, 2 minutes to speak because we have a lot of speakers
Well, you
tonight.
know who I am, Conrad Winkler. I live in Balaclava. I want to speak about garbage collection. They're picking up the bins, but when they're finished emptying them, they just leave them all over the road. So if we want to pull out with our cars, we have to move the bins. When we come back, we have to park in the middle of the road, move the bins. I've noted a number of times there were two people in the truck, one driving, the other one sitting on his butt doing absolutely nothing. In the old days, people walked next to the truck and put the bins away. I complained 6 weeks in a row. I rang Assist, and 6 weeks in a row they took my complaint. And I got sick of it and said, could someone ring me back? No one ever rang me back. I rang two councillors. One actually answered their phone and said they were as peed off as I am. The other one never rang me back. Anyway, I got sick of that, so I went to the desk and said I was sick of generic emails, and I was told at the desk that I'd been sent an email, so I said I didn't get it, and then I was told that someone had written me an email from higher up management and they hadn't actually sent it, which is not much use. So I've asked to speak to someone from the Waste Department for 6 weeks. No one ever rang me back or sent me an email other than the generic thing from Assist. Assist staff have been great. And then 2 hours ago, I got a call from Kasu, manager of garbage collection, and he asked me what my actual complaint was. Now, I've made the same complaint for 6 weeks, How the hell he didn't know what it was, I don't know. So either the message isn't getting up the line or the people that get it the other end don't care. Anyway, I'm not going to give up on this. If they just leave the bins all over the road, it's ridiculous.
Thank you, Conrad, for coming. Even if you've had that officer respond to you, we have an officer's response for you now as well, because I think the whole public is interested in this topic too. So, Simon Hill, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give a response for Conrad, please?
Yep. Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Conrad, for your question. Council officers are aware of concerns raised regarding bin placement by our contractor Citywide. We are working with Citywide to improve bin placement. The location referred to by yourself has been raised on a number of occasions, as you state, and it is disappointing to hear that the issue continues. As you mentioned, I have given you a call this afternoon, and I have committed to you to following through with our contractors to ensure that this behaviour improves in the future. Thank you for your question.
Can I make a comment?
Sorry, we can't go back and forth since there's other ones to go on to. Thank you, though. I call upon Michael Barrett submitting a question to Council.
Good evening, Mayor. How are you this evening?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Mayor, I think this is your last, we're coming up to the end of your term as Mayor. I want to thank you for your efforts on behalf of the ratepayers for the City of Port Phillip the last 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to address my questions following on from the previous question. I might just switch.
Michael, before you start, can you just do name suburb for the record,
sure.
please?
My name is Michael Barrett of Port Melbourne. This evening I'm speaking on behalf of the Albert Park State Electoral Committee of the Victorian Liberal Party. My question is following on from the preceding question. I'll address this to you, Mayor, but it's ultimately for the question is for the CEO of the City of Port Phillip. Does the CEO of the City of Port Phillip believe that the principles of competitive neutrality have been successfully applied in the tendering for and transition to the new contractor for the waste disposal services in the City of Port Phillip?
Thank you. CEO?
Through you, Mayor, yes I do.
Thank you, CEO. My second question, Mayor, is that firstly, we would like to congratulate the Victorian Government on the introduction of its container recycling initiative, although we do note that the introduction of the scheme in Victoria is at least 10 years behind other Australian states. We notice at this point that there are only 2 container recycling locations within the City of Port Phillip. One is located at the Port Melbourne Lifesaving Club, although curiously its opening hours are 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. on only 3 nights per week. And the second is listed as being at the IGA on Armstrong Street, Middle Park, although when I visited that store earlier this week and asked where the container recycling location was, no one in the store seemed to know. Mayor, I'll also point out that in your Facebook post last night you also brought to our attention a third site, which I think is at the back of Woolworths down on Graham Street. So thank you very much for bringing that to the ratepayers' attention. My question is, or our question is, container recycling should be encouraged within the City of Port Phillip. Therefore, what efforts is the City of Port Phillip making to press the local Victorian State Parliament, local member Nina Taylor or the relevant State Minister for additional recycling sites within the City of Port Phillip? And secondly, would the City of Port Phillip consider rate reductions for ratepayers willing to have additional new recycling locations in or around their rateable premises within the City of Port Phillip? Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Simon Hill online, can you provide a response, please?
Yes, I can. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for your question. The City of Port Phillip supports the CDS Victoria program and has been working closely with our network operator Return It to help identify suitable sites for return points throughout the municipality. Because City of Port Phillip is a densely populated municipality, there have been challenges identifying locations that would meet the requirements of a CDS return point, including space and proximity to residential properties. Our CEO and council officers recently met with Recycling Victoria to discuss the CDS Victoria rollout and the challenges that the City of Port Phillip were facing, and we are continuing to support Return It as they continued the expansion of the CDS Victoria throughout Port Phillip. Council officers have spoken to Return It today, who have confirmed that additional sites are scheduled to be rolled out over the coming month. Network operators will continue to roll out sites throughout Victoria until August 2024. There are requirements set by CDS Victoria regarding proximity of return points to residential properties, so we will be not exploring options closer to residential properties than is permitted. Rate reductions or discounts relating to CDS recycling locations are not under consideration at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. I call upon Brenda Forbath submitting a question to Council. Hi, Brenda.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Brenda Forbath, and I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of John Spearings, who submitted a question. We both live in Elwood. My question on his behalf refers to the recent referendum on recognition of First Nations peoples in the Constitution and the proposed voice to Parliament and executive government. While the referendum was not successful nationally or in Victoria, I note that 65% of voters in the seat of Macnamara voted yes. Every polling place in Port Phillip voted yes by very large margins, including all booths in Port Melbourne. Council, at its meeting on the 4th of October, supported the Uluru Statement from the Heart and a yes vote. It reaffirmed a commitment to lead reconciliation, truth-telling, community voice and self-determination of First Nations people through the development of its third Reconciliation Action Plan. Can the Mayor and the CEO please elaborate on the steps that will now be undertaken to make that commitment a reality?
Thank you. I'm actually going to ask Leslie Leahy to provide a response, please.
So thank you for the question, and through you, Mayor. Council recognises that this is a difficult and challenging time for many. The referendum decision does not alter Council's commitment to reconciliation, and the development of Council's third Reconciliation Action Plan will prioritise understanding and compassion between Indigenous and non-Indigenous members of our community. Council will work with traditional owner groups, First Nation people and the community to support and encourage important conversations around reconciliation. The Reconciliation Action Plan and partnerships like the Akon Dingilla, the Morning of Mourning ceremony are important opportunities to deliver on Council's commitment post the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon John Brooksmith submitting a question to Council. Hi, John.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is John Brooksmith. I live in Middle Park. I've got a question for the Council about the Sandbar Restaurant, 176B, Beaconsfield Parade. This cafe obtained a permit from the City of Port Phillip to occupy some 500 square metres of sand on the beach under the COVID-19 pandemic and recovery exemptions. This exemption expired on the 12th of October 2023, and Officer of Port Phillip Council has advised me that the cafe no longer has the authority to occupy the beach and trade thereon and serve alcohol. I note the business is continuing to trade on the public beach and outside their lease area, and I note they also serve alcohol on the beach outside their liquor licence area. My question is, can anyone take over the public beach in Port Phillip without a commercial purpose, for a commercial purpose, without permission, and serve alcohol on an area which is not when they're not holding a liquor licence to trade on that area? I understand the council policy is not to allow privatisation of the public beach. Will these councillors please instruct the City of Port Phillip CEO to restore the public beach to the public ownership and have all the cafe furniture on the sand removed and allow the public to walk on the beach as they normally do?
Thank you, John. Alfred and Lachlan Johnson.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, John, for your question. On October 9, 2023, Council was advised that the Victorian Government has extended the outdoor dining provisions that you refer to for a further 12 months. The amendment modifies Clause 52.18 Coronavirus COVID-19 Pandemic and Recovery exemptions by extending the temporary planning requirement exemptions for an additional 12 months. The State advises that the amendment is required to support the continuation of Victoria's social and economic recovery from the pandemic. Council is committed to working closely with our foreshore traders and residents to ensure they are complying with relevant legislation, in addition to ensuring our public areas, such as the beach, remain accessible for all our community to enjoy.
Thank you.
Could I just quickly ask, is that the 12th of October 2024?
Can you give a date again?
Through you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct.
Great. Okay.
Thank you. I call upon Stephen Liddicutt to submit a question to Council. Hi, Stephen.
Hello. My name is Stephen Liddicutt, and I live in East St Kilda. I'm a 3-decade resident in the same address in Inkerman Street, East St Kilda. I would like to ask a question in relation to the proposals to alter Inkerman Street to design bicycle lanes, and in relation to the consultation process. My question is, before I go on, first of all, I'd like to express my dismay with the fact that the consultation process has advanced to this point, where there were 4 original options. We're down to 2, and I feel as I've been excluded from that process of consultation. My question goes to the fact that at this stage in that process of consultation, there have been information sheets were delivered to properties in the area, and in all properties in Inkerman Street and all side streets north of Inkerman Street, all properties had been excluded from that mail out. That is, I'll repeat that, this is all addresses in Inkerman Street did not receive that flyer to indicate that we're currently in a consultation process and that there's calling upon input. So I didn't receive it, and no one else in Inkerman Street received that. And all streets, all side streets north of Inkerman Street also failed to do that. So I have, my question is, why did that happen?
Right.
As part of a healthy, robust consultation process, it is a gross oversight at best.
Thank you.
And given that, that since on the 18th, when the consultation process actually commenced, the best part of 2 weeks have elapsed, and it's only last night that I received my notice, officially received my notice. And effectively 40% of that 5-week period has subsequently elapsed.
Thank you.
And it's stymieing proper, healthy consultation.
So can you just clarify for me, you've received a notification now, like a notice now? You said last night, but you
I got it last night, about 2 weeks after the consultation process started, only after I spoke to Council to say that there'd been massive omissions in the mail-out.
Thank you. I'll ask an officer to come respond to your question, because we're talking to items that are general questions right now. So Fiona van der Hoeven, if you can respond, please.
Sure. Through you, Mayor. I can advise that Council actually engaged a third-party printing and delivery service to distribute 7,800 project flyers to residents and businesses in the project area. Now, that distribution area is bounded by Alma Road to the north, Carlisle Street to the south, Orrong Road to the east, and St Kilda Road to the west. Additional flyers are also distributed on properties on Inkerman Street between Barclay and St Kilda Road. Now, officers have just understood that given the size of the area, that the distribution would occur progressively. We are now aware that that had not been completed by the beginning of the week, and in recognition of the delay, officers are proposing to extend the engagement for an additional week, so closing on the 30th of November instead of the 23rd of November.
Thank you. I call upon, Councillor Sirikoff, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering how can we make sure that, or rectify the situation that if there are postcards that haven't been received in some, say, along Inkerman Street and some of the side streets, how can we rectify the problem to make sure that those people have, or those residents have received postcards? And can we do another mail out or another distribution to make sure, and maybe extend it even further so we can get that proper consultation?
Through you, Mayor, we will follow that up with the third-party distributor to see if they've got record on where they on when they tracked the streets and the delivery of those flyers.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Another question, please.
Sorry, I think... So the question was if we can ask questions of officers in relation to it. I think it's to the item, so I'm just clarifying that. Yep. It's usually members of the public right now, so let's keep it, if you ask questions of the public, not the officers.
No, it was to do with the officer, so...
Okay, thank you. All right, I call upon Cade Lengel. Submit a question to Council. Hello, Cade. Name, suburb, and you have 2 minutes, please.
My name's Cade Lengel and I live on Inkerman Street in St Kilda. Following up to what Stephen said, on the last council meeting of 18th of October regarding the Inkerman bike lanes, I would like to put forward to the council option 4, no change. I'd like to point out, out of the 7 speakers last week, 3 were not from this area, 3 were not even from Inkerman Street or St Kilda or use the Inkerman Street bike lanes. I believe that councillors should be listening to the residents of Inkerman Street and those who will be directly affected by this motion, and not those from the City of Moonee Ponds Valley Council. As mentioned before, a postcard went out to the residents of Inkerman Street on a survey to this. I have not got one. Attila, who's here, did not get one. Jasmine, who's on Inkerman Street in Balaclava, did not get one. Her neighbour Graham did not get one, and I know Steve only got his last night. How can we trust council on what they are saying if they fail to deliver on what they say? I keep hearing from councillors over and over about these consultations, but in the 3 years I've lived here, not a single person has consulted us, any of my neighbours, or any of the people mentioned above. So I ask council, who are these people that you are actually consulting? It was mentioned that residents can also use the Aldi car park. The only exit out of the car park is via a ramp that comes onto oncoming traffic.
Kate, I just need to stop there. This is about asking questions right now. So
okay.
Right now you're...
I'll get to it. Yep, okay. Yep. So the parking in Aldi is already scarce. I asked council... Well, they said last week that they can use council so that they can use the car parks. Have council actually consulted Aldi about this and the small businesses around Aldi, or do they just assume that Aldi and the management and the other small businesses are okay with this?
Fiona, can I refer to you, or is there someone else who wants to take that? About Aldi, if we've consulted them? Is that something to take a notice? Okay, we'll have to take that question on notice. Thank you. And I call upon Attila Dennis submitting a question to council. So again, I remind this is about submitting questions that can possibly be answered now or taken on notice, rather than expressing your views on the item because it's not on the agenda tonight. But if you have a question, please come.
Same question. Would be the same question.
Oh, that's all right. Then you don't have to, but if we don't have the answer now, I don't think we'll find it in the next few seconds. But on notice, that will go into the minutes. Is that correct? Are we able to do that? No? All right, Cade's question will go into the minutes with the response. So look for the minutes. It'll say that it was taken on notice. Thank you. Good. All right, now we're going to submissions to items on the agenda tonight. So first I call upon Colin Sindel, speaking to item 11.1, endorsement of the draft Sustainable Environment Strategy and draft Climate Emergency Action Plan. Hi, Colin.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, Councillors. Colin Sindel from St Kilda. And I'd like to address my comments to item 6.3 of the officer's report, the recommendation not to establish a community advisory group under the Climate Action Plan. I think this recommendation misunderstands the intent of the proposal to establish such a group. For example, the report suggests that an advisory group would replicate the current engagement with stakeholders, such as PCAN's meetings with council officers. This is not correct. We very much value and appreciate the engagement we have with council officers, but tackling climate change requires a whole-of-community approach. We are a network of environmental organisations and do not claim to speak for the wider community. Business, faith groups, the education sector, housing, charities, to name a few. Yet everyone is affected by climate change and everyone has a role to play in climate action. The proposal for the advisory group was based on making the most of the knowledge and skills of people across Port Phillip and achieving the best outcomes we can for this community. The aim was to support and enhance delivery of the Climate Action Plan and to amplify what Council alone can do by sharing information and activating networks and actions across the community. We know that in tackling complex problems, genuine collaboration, co-design and partnership with affected communities leads to better decisions. This is why so many other councils have adopted some form of council community governance mechanism to support climate action. In closing, I would ask Council and councillors to reflect on the Nature Strip guidelines process and how that might have evolved differently had there been genuine dialogue with the community in the first instance, and how much more cost-effective this would have been. Nature Strip gardens also illustrate what the creativity and commitment of community members can bring to our city. I urge Council to help better harness our community's expertise through an advisory forum of some kind, and there are many models of good governance for climate action you can draw from. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you, Colin. I call upon Justin Halliday, speaking to item 11.1 as well. Hi, Justin.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors, officers. Justin Halliday, St Kilda East. I'm speaking to item 11.1. First, I'd like to commend Council on declaring a climate emergency and following through and developing a climate emergency action plan. Unfortunately, the plan doesn't live up to the challenges that we will face in the future. The plan says all the right things, but it is light on commitments that will actually lead to decarbonisation and better prepare the City of Port Phillip for the impacts of climate change. The plan, unfortunately, is based on outdated science and continues the legacy of policy making based on wishful thinking and willful ignorance. Global warming is accelerating. This year is going to be on track to be 1.4 degrees above the baseline measurements. The Arctic sea ice is collapsing. Antarctic ice sheets are collapsing at unprecedented rates, accelerating sea level rise. And yet this plan perpetuates the idea that we can keep warming to 1.5 degrees while still emitting greenhouse gases for another 20 years. Council claims to be using 100% renewable energy for its operations, but it hides 7,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions behind dubious offsets. Port Phillip is one of the most vulnerable municipalities to sea level rise, and we're still waiting for the Port Phillip Coastal Hazard Assessment, which is now 3 years late. We can't make a plan without knowing what we'll face here. And we live in one of the richest suburbs in one of the richest countries in the entire world, and instead of taking real action to tackle climate change, we'd rather spend tens of millions of dollars on a sports field on a road that already has 6 other sports fields. This plan is not good enough, and, you know, it's a start, but this is nowhere near going to actually tackle the challenges we'll face. Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to point out, by the way, that previous gentleman, I think I made the comments about Aldi, not the council officers.
Okay.
Take full responsibility. They were not about resident parking.
You're not here to hear that, but thank you for letting us know.
You know, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. No? Okay. I call upon Robert Mahoney, speaking to item 11.1. Is Robert here? No. Nope. All right. I call upon Ronna Small, speaking to 11.1.
Thank you. Rhonda Small, I live in St Kilda. Councillors, I have 2 minutes, so I'll focus on 2 additional initiatives that I ask you to include in Act and Adapt and the Climate and Emergency Action Plan when you move to endorse these documents tonight. 1, an energy efficiency and upgrade program for low-income households, and 2, a grants program for community climate projects to mobilise community action. It is not just Pecan proposing such initiatives, though we certainly have. Council commissioned a sustainability survey of 400 randomly selected residents from every precinct in Port Phillip, published in June this year, and its findings are informative. 60% of all respondents were very concerned about climate change and its local impacts, as high as 82% in Albert Park and 75% in St Kilda, so my Lake Ward councillors would do well to note. The majority also said they wanted Council to engage in a range of activities to lead and assist the community in addressing climate change. To name just two, 79% wanted Council to provide advice and incentives to help people make their homes and buildings more sustainable. So why not initiate a program of energy efficiency and upgrades for low-income households as a first step? If cost of living issues prompted your decision not to go to the rate cap this year, surely in this windfall year of higher than expected parking revenue, you can commit funds to helping reduce energy costs for some of our most vulnerable households. And 70% wanted Council to provide grants for community groups to work on projects to address climate change. So why not support such a grants program starting early next year to mobilise and support community action on climate? Both these initiatives have already been implemented by other councils in the inner Melbourne area, so there are examples of how they work. Trials, investigations and feasibility are hardly needed. So just as you initiated councillors' immediate actions in response to the pandemic emergency, so too can you decide tonight on immediate actions to help our community address rampantly progressing climate change. I commend these 2 initiatives to you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Am I going to do the other one?
Is there a reason why she's not here? I just want to be fair that we don't...
Yes, there is. She's on a train down to Geelong and couldn't get here tonight.
Okay. It is hard. I don't want to set a precedent that people are reading out other people's items instead of them attending.
Deb has been participating in all the discussions with officers and others and really felt strongly about wanting to say something tonight.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
What's your point of order?
I don't think it's appropriate to have third parties turn up and talk on behalf of other people. It's against the.
I do have her express written permission.
Could you just wait, please?
So unless primary evidence has been provided beforehand, it would be the equivalent of my mother-in-law turning up and speaking on my behalf. We don't know if that's been verified. We don't know if this person has the authority to speak.
Please, if you could just let me rule in the point of order. I understand the concern. I would like to also express if that had come in an email or something that we knew that it was, where it's the setting of the precedent. She has provided an email. So I'll accept that we have verification and we know who this is from. I'll allow it for now. So go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm speaking for Deborah Sykes, who's been a ratepayer in St Kilda West for 23 years. The recent sustainability survey showed strong levels of community support for Council to do more to address the causes of climate change and to mitigate local impacts. This makes the Climate Emergency Action Plan an excellent way for Council to meet the needs of our community. Disappointingly, the current plan does not demonstrate Council's commitment to addressing the serious impacts from climate change. I'm genuinely disappointed that the plan has no new programs or strategies in a city where the community faces so many challenges. The work done now to address climate change will be felt most strongly by the next generations coming through. Therefore, we need to do it well and intentionally. Given the strong levels of support from the community, a community reference group would greatly assist Council to work with people, gain expertise and address climate change impacts in a meaningful way. The Eco Centre is instrumental in addressing the challenges ahead. We're so lucky to have such an organisation. The Eco Centre places Council in a strong position to implement a robust climate emergency action plan if Council were to fully support and work with this unique and strong organisation. The highest priority in community feedback identified the need for a program to support community renewable energy uptake, While this is acknowledged in the plan, there is no detail as to how this is to be done. There is no budget and there are no timelines. The approach to neighbourhood batteries and EV charging to date has been fairly lacklustre, and there are enormous opportunities to mobilise funding from state and federal governments. We should be further ahead than investigating how and where neighbourhood battery energy storage might play a role to support the community's use of renewable energy, as the plan states. Given Port Phillip has 11 kilometres of foreshore and low terrain, it is one of the most vulnerable councils in Melbourne. To do this, we need timelines and dates for the flood management, sea level rise planning controls and the foreshore management plan. A robust coastal adaptation plan is urgently needed. We need to protect what makes our city so unique and beautiful. To do this, we need a climate emergency action plan that sets meaningful targets and has a realistic budget. Without this, our beautiful Port Phillip won't be as amazing for future generations.
Thank you very much. And I just want to acknowledge that it can be a slippery slope if I allow that in the future, so I'll take it on a case-by-case basis, just so we're all clear on that. I call upon Ian McDonald speaking to item 11.1 as well. Hello, Ian.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, councillors. Ian McDonald, St Kilda. I come here tonight to respond to the Council's draft Emergency Climate Action Plan 11.1 being decided upon this evening as a private citizen only, not as a member of OPAC, but we will decide on its position next week. I've read this 44-page 5-year commitment to long-term planning and action to bring about change in behaviours in our community a number of times, seeking some clarity around identified threats, ideas, planning, expectations, and on to what's being done. Briefly and only to this point, City of Port Phillip's Council's Climate Emergency Resolution on page 9 excuse me, adopted on 18 September 2019 states that Council will address 8 priorities stemming from declaring a climate emergency, where one of them considers the impact of the climate emergency as part of organisational decision-making and planning. Wow. Far-reaching as climate change is, climate change adaptation is critical social change. Adaptation means altering our behaviour, social systems and, in some cases, ways of life to ensure our families are safe, the economy prospers and the environment in which we live is safe. I draw your attention to this on page 13. By 2028, that's 9 years later, Council has completed installation in a full and fit-for-purpose risk management reporting and decision-making framework to manage climate-related risk to service delivery, assets and finances. I see that much is to be done in the intervening period to 2028. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
I see Peter's been crossed off here, so I'll go to the blue forms. I have Jack Halliday for 11.1 as well. Hi, Jack.
Madam Mayor. Jack Halliday from Balaclava. Madam Mayor, councillors and officers. The final draft Climate Emergency Action Plan shows that Council is paralysed by its own divisions. Australia is going through a renewable energy revolution and Council has chosen not to join it. Our 2 partners in the Inner Melbourne Partnership have joined and they are a long way ahead of Port Phillip. Yarra, with similar demographics and emissions to Port Phillip, about 1.3 million tonnes a year, has completed its first 4 years of its climate emergency plan and is embarking on the next phase, with a blueprint prepared by Beyond Zero Emissions, called the Roadmap to Zero Emissions by 2030 for dealing with commercial and industrial emissions. Yarra has supported $482,000 worth of community climate action projects through small project grants. It's more than doubled commercial solar capacity. It's supported a combined business renewable energy purchase program equivalent to energy use in 5,000 homes. And it's on its second community battery project, and through its energy powerhouse, the Yarra Energy Foundation, is coordinating the business viability case of 22 councils' community battery projects, including Port Phillip's, which PCAN has been involved with since the beginning. In Melbourne, the City Council is working towards 5 community batteries. At the September 19th Future Melbourne Committee meeting, councils voted 8-1 in favour of the Retrofit Melbourne plan, which will see Council roll out a range of measures aimed at decarbonising more than 80 commercial buildings each year. In our current situation, we won't be able to get near any of these projects for the duration of this plan. Our question is that keeping faith with what our community wants and expects? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, I call upon Linda Condon, also speaking to 11.1.
Hi there, Linda Condon from Albert Park. I'm speaking to 11.1. I want to say, first of all, the audience for this new document is the community, not council or councillors, and as such, I would have great difficulty in saying that it's an easy document to read. It's both confusing and difficult to understand. I'm disappointed in the plan, considering PCAN and many community members have tried to provide feedback, and much of that feedback, including the fact that 70% of people surveyed indicated that community grant programs should be part of the plan, has not been included. There are a number of concerns in this document, including the fact that it says our urban forest is flourishing, which unfortunately is not the case, with only slight increase in canopy cover and significant losses in private properties. In addition, the mention of the percentage of houses with solar, why is there no target for increase in this, as with other councils? That's just to name a few issues. This is not about me. I won't be here in 2050. Climate change and its impacts are going to affect our children and yours, and I'm sure that some amongst you have young children or grandchildren. So some of you will say, it's not our responsibility, but the Commonwealth or state governments. Well, it seems at least 70% of councils in Australia have either set or are planning ambitious emissions reduction targets for their own operations, while 80% have set or are investigating emissions reductions targets across their entire community. This is according to a document from 2021 Australian Local Government Climate Review. Therefore, I would like to see a review of this Climate Emergency Action Plan, because it is not adequate, in early 2025, because addressing climate change is a fast-moving area requiring regular reviews and not just monitoring and reporting.
Thank you, Linda. This is the last blue form I have, so calling on Patricia Jensen. If anybody's still here that hasn't spoken and thinks they've registered, can you come up to the governance team, please? Hello, Patricia.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, officers. Patricia Jensen, Elwood ratepayer of 32 years. The Climate Emergency Action Plan report rightly highlights humanity has a narrow window to prevent further disastrous impacts on our planet. I am genuinely excited about the transition taking place in the world to renewable energy and conservation. It's going to be the biggest thing since the Industrial Revolution. My great-grandfather drove a horse-drawn cart. Now my grandchildren ride e-scooters and neighbours have and driving electric vehicles. Australia has the most solar panels on rooftops in the world today. There is no time to waste to meet urgent climate targets. Port Phillip Council must set better action targets, a bigger budget, and work tirelessly and review progress to see what success can look like. The best councils are engaging, educating and mobilising their constituents to take action and minimise their carbon footprint. I'm shocked that the recommendation to establish a climate advisory committee has been dismissed. To not embrace constituents and formalise the expertise offered is blinkered. My experience is that the Port Phillip community is highly intelligent, professional, creative, generous and committed. A climate advisory committee offers value for money and partnership. The Treasurer at the Eco Centre quantified the independent value of their voluntary work here recently at $400,000, the 2017 figure. Port Phillip needs to keep up with the best councils and their successors, both inner and regional councils. They all have formal, inclusive, constituent committees advising council. Port Phillip must do the same and provide community grants for innovation to move forward with haste. We need to win this race together.
Thank you, Patricia. That is all the public speakers I have on my list tonight. Peter, you didn't want to speak? Okay. All right, fair enough. So I'm going to move on to councillor question time. Councillors, do you have any questions you would like to raise that are of a public nature? Not to an item tonight. Councillor Niagri?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple. My first question was actually just following on from the public submissions during public question time. Council officers have just advised that they're extending the consultation for Inkerman by a week. Given that we are now more than 2 weeks into the consultation period, would it be more appropriate, or would council officers consider extending it 2 weeks, given that would then, I guess, give back to the community the time that seemed to have been lost given the delay with the leafleting?
Through you, Mayor, can I take that on notice? Look, it is disappointing that the consultation has started and not all those materials have been distributed to some of those key households. I will discuss that further with officers and report back outside the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Following the transition to a new waste provider in July, we've unfortunately experienced some pretty significant issues to our regular collections of waste, recycling and FOGO across the City of Port Phillip. I've been contacted numerous times by residents who are pretty frustrated. My question to officers is how Council has been addressing this issue since the beginning of July.
Thank you. I'll refer to Simon Hill.
Thanks for the question. Yep, through you, Mayor. Officers have been working closely with our contractor citywide to improve services since the commencement of the new curbside waste contract. This includes meeting daily with citywide management to improve operational services. We have seen missed bins numbers improve to about 20 to 30 per day, and pleasingly we are returning to a pickup rate of about 98% of missed bins within 2 days. We will continue to work closely with citywide to ensure that services are provided in accordance with the contract requirements. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
Yes, just three more. At the 4th of October Council meeting, I asked Council officers about the possible funding gap caused by the delay in settlement of the Marlborough Street Community Housing Project and who was going to be covering that gap. I just wanted to follow up with officers as to whether they had an answer at this point.
Thank you. Alfred Lachlan Johnson.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for your question. The development is owned and managed by Housing First. Council are not aware of any delay in rent to Housing First. The contract of sale indicated settlement was scheduled for the 6th of November 2023. However, Council and Housing First have been able to work together to accelerate settlement, which was successfully achieved on the 12th of October 2023.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've had a number of community members query me around the collection of used vapes, and I was wondering if council officers could advise as to whether council collects used vapes across the city, and if we don't, where we direct people.
Thank you. I'll refer to Simon Hill.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor, for your question. Council cannot accept vapes in any of our curbside waste bins or waste streams, including e-waste. In partnership with other councils, we are currently investigating options to safely dispose of used vapes, as there is currently no clear disposal process due to the mix of batteries, nicotine and plastic. Vapes are currently a leading cause of fires in waste trucks and other waste disposal sites. Our waste team have submitted an expression of interest to be part of a vape and e-cigarette recycling pilot program with a company called EnviroStream, for the purpose of exploring options for the recycling of vapes and e-cigarettes. We would advise residents to inquire at their place of purchase for options for return of used vapes or hold on to used vapes until disposal options become available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Victorian Government recently unveiled the CELDA Deprano statue at Trades Hall, which is part of a broader piece of work by the state government to address gender inequity in how we honour people and the statues that we create. Can council officers advise how many statues we have in Port Phillip, with a breakdown on the male and female statues, statues depicting animals and objects, and the number of statues we have depicting First Nations people? Except this is probably a question for notice.
I'll refer to Brian T. Do you have that rundown for us tonight?
Through you, Mayor, no, I do not have the number of statues and how they and the representations that they are as requested by the councillor. I will take that on notice and provide that information as soon as I can.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, do you have a question?
First off, how amazing would it be if he did know off the top of his head? So, look, my question is regarding the South Melbourne Centrelink that was announced some time ago as being closed by the federal government due to the end of their lease, and sorry, I got distracted. Apparently, they are looking to find another location in South Melbourne, but have been having difficulty doing so. In the meantime, the location is now closed and all the operations are being moved to the Windsor Centrelink. Given the impact on our community, significant impact of that closure, I did ask officers some time ago to see whether we could provide any assistance in finding a new location or new lease. Can officers give any guidance on any assistance we were able to make in that regard, or whether we're continuing to work with them? I note that Minister Shorten has put out a call, it's a little bit strange, but to the community to try to find locations and leases as well for it.
Thank you. Alfred Lachlan-Johnson.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for your question. As you stated, Services Australia publicly announced the closure of their South Melbourne Service Centre in August 2023, following an unsuccessful market sweep for alternative locations. Services Australia advised in their public release that they'd been exploring alternate property solutions on 17 different occasions since 2020, including advertising via an open tender process, exploration on co-location with other government agencies. However, no suitable sites were identified or available. Councillors received requests from a number of politicians regarding assistance for Services Australia. Officers considered what properties were available in Council's portfolio and also what properties we knew from local knowledge were available in the South Melbourne area that would be immediately or close to available. Unfortunately, it was found that potentially suitable properties were either currently tenanted or would require significant capital works or did not meet the operational requirements of Services Australia. This remains an issue that we're looking at, and if something does come available, we will alert the federal government to that.
Thank you. Another question?
Sorry, just a quick follow-up. When we're talking about significant capital works, is there a range of costs that you'd consider to be significant?
Through you, Mayor, no, I don't have the range, but from what our property team was able to ascertain, there were no things that were suitable to Service Australia's requirements, both around the function of the centre, but also the capital that would be required.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Sirkov?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask council officers about the situation with rubbish bins and the new contractor. I'm still receiving emails from residents not happy with the way that bins are collected by the new contractor citywide and how they're left after the bins are emptied, either strewn across the streets, then impacting on car parking, and also left lying on the ground, and in some cases where bins are having broken lids. So is there any feedback to the company to address these problems so that we can get a better outcome every day? It's a collection day and bins are not obstructing the roadways.
Thank you, Councillor Sirkov. That is similar to a question we had tonight, but Lachlan Johnson might add to it.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, as Simon Hill outlined before, this is something that we are raising with Citywide daily. The council officers meet with Citywide every morning before collection. Really do encourage residents, if their bins are damaged or there are placement or bin placement issues, to report them to council. Every single one is reported to Citywide and taken up with them, their drivers and their runners in their toolbox meetings. Additionally, officers are also following up for certain areas where there's particular acute issues around bin placement. We heard about that from one of the residents this evening about in East St Kilda. I encourage residents to continue to contact council on that. In addition to that, we've got very specific requirements under the contract about bin placement, and council reserves all its rights under the contract to enforce that. It's a basic requirement that our community should expect.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford, do you have a question?
One more quick one. Justin may have answered it. I did just want to clarify around the Aldi comment. I believe, could officers clarify, whatever statement was made was that Aldi customers, instead of parking on the street side, could use the underground car park. It was not a suggestion that residents would use it. So I guess I just wanted to clarify if that is possible. Maybe it is a take on notice.
Noted, Fiona. Yeah? Do you have no response? Just noted? Thanks. All right. No more questions. Then we'll move on to sealing schedule. Councillors, we have no items for sealing on tonight's agenda. So on to petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have no petitions or joint letters on tonight's agenda. So we're on to presentation of reports. So for the first one, thanks. I can see that better. Thank you. So the first one up is 8.1. This is the presentation of the August CEO report, issue 99. Getting there. All right. Do we have any questions of the officers in relation to the report? No. All right. Councillors, we have the officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Who would like to second it? Councillor Bond. Thank you. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
Every time these reports come up, I try and refer to at least one of the pearls of wisdom that's in there. And this week, Mr Halliday Senior's already alluded to one of the things that's highlighted in the CEO's report, and that's the grant that the Yarra Energy Foundation has been successful in obtaining for our council and 21 other councils in fast-tracking the Neighbourhood Batteries project to identify the local potential and feasibility of neighbourhood batteries. And as the CEO notes, through community engagement, the project has identified locations and communities ready to embrace these neighbourhood batteries, and the Foundation is leading the technical feasibility component of this project to shortlist viable batteries, and we're getting very, very, very close to finishing those business cases. Looking forward to seeing those neighbourhood batteries in the city of Port Phillip. Always great to read your report, CEO.
Councillor Bond? No? Anybody else speaking to this item? No? Then we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right, now we're on to 10.1. This is Lagoon Reserve Reconstruction Award. Councillors, are there any questions of the officers in relation to this item? I'll ask one. I know that we have the finish to be in July, but is that the anticipated when it might be able to be used, or what do we think around the timing for that? Lachlan Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll refer to Council's Project Manager, Lucas Blattman, to answer that query.
Through you, Mayor. The grass is planned to be laid.
Sorry, if you could stop real quick. It's really hard to hear you. If you were able to adjust your mic a little bit.
A little bit better?
Not really. Just go ahead and try, though. If not, I'll just skip my question. Go ahead and try.
Sorry. So we're planning to lay the grass by the end of March, and then there'll be a 6-week establishment period. So,
okay. We might ask somebody in the room to answer real quick. Lachlan Johnson will. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So the grass is due to be planted in, I believe, March, and then the establishment period goes from that. So we anticipate that it will be ready to be used in the second half of next year. So the June date is not when the grass is being planted. That's going to be planted in March. I think it's a 4-month, 16 weeks establishment period.
And then will there be a fence around it? Because I know there are many eager dog users in the area that really want to get on that open, don't have it as long. Is a fence going to stay up, or what is it? Just like a ribbon we think that's going to be around it, the bunting, or a fence?
Through you, Mayor, Lucas tells me there will definitely be a temporary fence to enable the grass to establish well during that period and set it up so it'll be a great facility for all users of the reserve once it's finished.
Thank you. Councillor Martin has a question.
2 questions, please, Mayor. Question 1, will the Bubba Womanjeka senior leadership team have the opportunity to work with the successful contractor to ensure that the childcare centre is not negatively impacted by any of the works that take place? That's my first question.
Through you, Mayor, I think if there's any concerns from the centre, they should reach out to council in the first instance and we can work out how to best address those concerns.
And my second question, I think I know the answer, but just to confirm, when we look at the council plan, there are plans to upgrade pitch 3 in Murphy Reserve. We're now doing the Lagoon Reserve redevelopment at the same time. What action has council taken to ensure that these projects don't overlap and to ensure that we'll only be down one soccer field at any one time over the winter?
Through you, Mayor, I'll have to take that question on notice. I know that we have been working hard to try and ensure that any impact to the overall soccer field provision across the municipality is limited. Obviously, there are no good times to shut down reserves during winter, during the soccer season at all, but we are doing our best to try and align the construction periods outside of soccer where we possibly can. But I'll take on notice the specific timing of the Lagoon, the J.L. Murphy works.
Thank you. CEO?
Through you, Mayor, I think Lachlan's been away and he's only just getting back up to speed. And I'm not sure that we've made a broader community announcement at this stage. I'd have to check with Alison Kenwood, who's unable to be here this evening. But we are looking at proposing to defer the pitch 3 development because of drainage issues that we've been working through, and because while we now believe we've resolved those, there's a high risk that the field would not be available for the soccer season and we'd have 2 fields out at the same time. The team have been working with various stakeholders to discuss that.
Thank you. Councillor Prodigy?
Thanks very much. It goes, it dovetails nicely into Councillor Martin's question, but do we have, once this project's completed, it's not specifically in relation to the tender, but do we have a management plan, a medium and long-term management plan for the field to ensure that ratepayers get good value for money from this investment? There's been a number of situations across the city over the years where we've spent substantial amounts of upgrade money on sporting fields, and a very short time thereafter, we haven't got the results we wanted. Is there a specific management plan for this asset to ensure that this money doesn't go to waste in any way, shape or form 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now?
Lachlan Johnson?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Pearl, yes, there is. As you point out, with a number of other fields, the maintenance after the initial capital construction is vital to ensure that the field remains at its peak condition long after the capital works are completed. As part of the design of this project, given it's Lagoon Reserve, we're trying to build a high-quality sporting field on top of a lagoon. We've done extensive works looking at what the best solution would be. Those works have not just covered off what was required for the capital investment up front, but also what would be required ongoing to ensure that it will be remain appropriate and won't deteriorate beyond that. In addition to that, whilst I was on leave, Council entered into a new contract for sports field maintenance provision across the city, and this maintenance management of Lagoon Reserve will fall to the specialist contractor that Council's awarded that contract to.
Councillor Pearl?
And just to follow up, would it be possible to get a copy of that plan, please?
Through you, Mayor, we can give you details of what's required under that design, yes.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Martin and Councillor Bond. Wow, consistent. Councillor Martin, speak to it.
I've been waiting many, many, many years to be in a position where I could either sit in the gallery and see the council put this motion, or fortunately to actually be here to be able to move the motion myself. Those of us in Port Melbourne have been watching Lagoon Reserve slowly deteriorate for a very, very long time. And I know that residents, sports people, recreational walkers, dog walkers, everyone's going to be absolutely delighted when this project's done. Can I thank all those people in Port Melbourne who've participated in the various consultation processes, and can I thank all the officers who've been involved in the process, thank those involved in the tendering process. Long, long awaited upgrade. Can't wait to see it start, even keen to see it finished.
Thank you. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, the condition of this oval's been unsatisfactory since at least about 2013, so it is good that we are finally getting on with the job of upgrading this sports field so that it can cater to cricket, soccer and other sports. This is the first step in the redevelopment of this oval, is the redevelopment of the sporting field. There's also a new pavilion coming at some point in time in the future, which will be built once the sporting field has been reconstructed. So I think it's been 10 years that we've been working on plans for this, so it is great to finally have something in front of us where we're awarding a contract and knowing that works will start within 8 weeks, according to this plan before us. So it's good to hear.
Thank you. I'll add, this was definitely an item that was to my attention at the beginning of this council term, and good we're getting onto it. It's this field does require a lot of works because of the lagoon, but I think it's important for the community, the dog community, to acknowledge. I'd like to express my commitment that we know they want to use it every day, and we have sports that want to use it on the seasons, and they're looking for that harmonious outcome. This first round is great to have the oval, the cricket nets, the sports lighting, and the walking path. There is a little bit for many, and I am excited to see this come to life. Anybody else want to speak to it? No? All right. Then we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right. On to 11.1. Okay. This is endorsement of the draft Sustainable Environment Strategy and draft Climate Emergency Action Plan. Long title, but an important one. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to this item? Councillor Nyagri?
Could council officers advise and explain a bit about the delay, given I think, my understanding, we've had 2 motions around a climate emergency over, I believe, the last 4-year period. So this report has been somewhat delayed. Just wondering if officers could explain that delay.
Is that for Fiona or Brian? Who would like to take it? Brian?
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, yes, the report has taken some time to be developed. The principal reasons for that, I think, was that there were a number of engagement periods with councillors and indeed with the community, and a number of requests as part of that engagement to consider further and other options and develop further and other options, which has been done as part of the process and has resulted in some changes which have been picked up in the report tonight.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
I've got a couple, yeah. My next question was in relation to the creation of 2 different documents. I was just wondering if council officers could advise as to when the decision was made to have 2 separate strategy documents, and whether that's something that other councils have done and whether that would be considered best practice.
Is that for you, Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. And through you, Mayor, a decision was made by council early on to have 2 separate documents, and council officers have worked to implement that. Essentially, the understanding or justification was to have a climate change emergency action plan as a self-standing and independent document to the council's Act and Adapt policy, which was then separately reviewed. but Council made a decision early on to keep those two documents separate and for them to be independent documents in the sense that they could be read and understood on their own. One, as I said, the review is more about council operations and targets and measures, and then the other being the climate emergency response. But clearly there's an overlap with contents, and council officers have tried to separate the two documents out, consistent with the decision that was made by council early on.
So just to clarify, did council officers advise were council officers advising and recommending this approach, or was this an approach ultimately led by councillors?
My recollection was it was an approach that was ultimately led by councillors.
Thanks. My next question was around, the spending within the plan. There's been some limited additional spending as part of this new plan. Was there a direction from council laws, or was it merely a recommendation of council officers to limit additional spending as part of this process? Was that simply a recommendation based on the science and the need at the time?
Through you, Mayor, there was no direction in terms of the expenditure. The process involved a review of council's expenditure, both in terms of act and adapt, and in terms of the expenditure the council undertakes more generally around responding to climate change. And so there's effectively three components in that expenditure. There's the BAU, which might be lighting upgrades, vehicle moving to electric vehicle emissions. The report indicated that cost is around over 5 years about $42 million. In addition, there's the implementation of the Act and Adapt, and that picks up items such as increased permeability across council, flood mapping and platforms, and engaging the outcome of that in relation to how we manage our assets, water management in Fisherman's Bend. So there's a number of items that then pick up directly through Act and Adapt. And having done the review, the focus of the review was on Act and Adapt, and the recommendation is that there is an increase, that funding of about 435 continues, and that the recommendation is that through the budget process, council considers additional funding for the water-sensitive urban design gardens on the basis that the costs of delivering those have increased. There's also a gap identified in terms of the implementation of our environmental design standards, and a recommendation was that funding be provided for a trial to ensure implementation of those standards as part of the delivery of our permit as part of the implementation of building permits that are granted.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I can add to that, just to be clear, officers developed a broad range of options of interventions that the council could take, from what was within an existing funding envelope to increasing that. What is represented in what we've recommended in the strategy now has come through many months of engagement with councillors iteratively around the types of things that you as a group would be most likely to support, and also in terms of the things that we thought coming through the community consultation were worthy of further consideration during the budget process. One of the key things I have as a responsibility in advising is around long-term financial sustainability, as well as our commitment around environmental sustainability. That means we need to consider some of these decisions as part of a broader budget when we can see the overall picture. So what we've tried to do is develop a plan that best fits with the budget that's currently available, with some extensions of that, and coming back to provide some additional opportunity for councillors to consider that alongside a bigger budget process.
Thank you. My one final question was, we had a number of bits of community feedback that our action plan and strategy are somewhat inconsistent or different from some other like councils and other local government areas in Victoria, and that some of the recommendations that community brought forward to us, things like grant programs, community reference panels, have not been recommended in this final report, but have obviously been adopted in other areas in Victoria. I was wondering if council officers could explain the rationale for that decision as well.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillor, the original scope of the review included consideration of not only state and federal government policies, but indeed the work that had been undertaken by other councillors. So that work, the policies of other councils, informed the development of the review. There were, as part of the engagement, there were a number of recommendations through that participation, through the engagement for community-facing programs. What council officers considered is that those recommendations are worthy of further consideration and development, and the report and the documentation reflects that. What council officers were not in a position to was to assess the feasibility of that, of those recommendations and suggestions from the community, and instead propose as a next step, as part of implementation, to have a look at some of those opportunities for more outward community-facing programs, develop those and bring those back to council for further consideration.
Thank you. Any further questions on the item? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to ask officers if they could clarify the feedback summary. Just want to understand for both of them, and if I use attachment 3 as just an example, have I added this up correctly that you've broken down, you said 4 formal submissions, 30 unique contributors, and then you've broken down the number of people by age. If I add up the number by age, is that the total number that we received in relation to the strategy? The have your say?
Brian. Sorry, who would like to take that?
I'm just, through you, Mayor, I'm looking at that now, but I would say, through you, Mayor, that the number of engagement, the number of responses was relatively low, but again, the type of engagement that the approach to engagement was not a broad-ranging engagement. Again, council early on made a decision in terms of the type of engagement, and the focus was very much on a review and the action plan in response to the climate emergency, based on the science as it was, what other policies there were from governments, and the engagement was of a target nature, so the numbers were relatively small.
So I'm just going to paraphrase to make sure I understood that. If I look at the numbers then, assuming there was 31 responses for the Act and Adapt, and there was 29 responses for the climate change part. So we did a targeted have your say, a targeted feedback from groups that are already engaged in this, rather than the broader community who may have different views around this.
Through you, Mayor, I'd say it's fair to say that it was very much a have your say engagement, and then a targeted engagement as you described, and those numbers, I don't have them in front of me, but they're certainly consistent with my recollection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of officers? Councillor Crawford.
I just wanted to ask, when is our coastal hazards plan due? The one that apparently is a few years behind. Do we know when that is coming to us, generally?
Through you, Mayor. Again, Alison's not available tonight. She has the details around that.
Okay.
From memory, I believe
Chris, I'm online.
Dana's online.
Dana's online. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor, we have engaged a consultant to undertake the coastal adaptation strategy and redo our foreshore management plan. So we'll be bringing some information to councillors on that early in the new year. We are working within the timeframes that the state government has set for that. We have a couple of years to progress, and so next year will be engagement as we work through the stages that the state government has set.
Thank you, Dana. Councillor Crawford?
Now, this is probably a question on notice, but under some of our community grants program, sustainability is one of the kind of categories. So can people, is it something that we could look at in the new year, is adjusting perhaps some of that criteria, given we do already have some grant programs rather than starting a new one? Is that a possibility?
Who's taking that?
Through you, Mayor. And yes, there are a number. There's this year I think there's about $90,000 that is allocated this financial year in our existing budget. That is allocated for those community-facing grants. And then, as I said, there'll be a review as part of the implementation. We're working through a number of other proposals for community-facing, whether it's grants-type programs or gap analysis, so that we can identify how council can support the community in terms of identifying what the gaps are, whether that is to picking up renewable energy or and so on. As part of any development of any proposal, we will have a look at our existing offerings and to see if they are compatible and to see if we can better tailor them to meet council priorities, and that includes the work that we do with some of our delivery partners, including the Eco Centre.
Thank you. Any further questions? Otherwise, I have something I need to read to you. Councillors, as you have been advised, officers have made an amendment to page 47 of attachment 1, being the Act and Adapt Sustainable Environment Strategy. The figure in the far right column has been amended to include the correct figure of 19,860K. This will be amended in the attachment, which will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Does that clarify, everyone? Thank you. All right, so you have the officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Crawford to move. Who would like to second it? Is that a second? Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak to it?
I wasn't planning on moving, so I haven't thought my things through. Look, thank you for all the feedback we've received. I don't know that any of us are quite in the place that we wanted to be. I think there is a lot going on in the municipality in kind of a business as usual, but around some of the climate ambition, the challenge is that some of it is at other levels, and there is movement at those levels around, efficiency programs, retrofitting. I would, rather not, reinvent the wheel, but maybe there's opportunity at a future date, at a review point, to tap into other councils or level of government's programs to do that. I do think that some of the changes need to be big and they need to happen at other levels of government. Do I think that this document delivers all that council can? No, I don't think we're there yet. So I do acknowledge that. However, now that I've moved it, I was going to move an amendment, but I'll leave that to Councillor Martin about doing a review in the earlier of a new council term. As things keep moving, there's constantly new programs coming on board from various other levels of government that maybe we can work alongside them as opposed to having to reinvent the wheel ourselves. So I'm going to acknowledge that it's not everything people want it to be. It's not ambitious enough. But I think there is opportunity to get on and let's stop. I want to pass this document tonight because we have spent enough time on this document. We actually need to just do some of the actions and look at where we can do more. So I'm going to urge fellow councillors to pass this tonight, not because we've ended up where we want to, but get it down, let's get started, and then hopefully support an amendment to do a review early in the term of a new council when we have more information, more programs rolled out, and see what more is possible at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you. I think that that little episode there where no councillor wanted to actually move this motion was a bit of an indication of how much of a sort of political orphan this updated plan and an action plan is. I think it really is a reflection of the council that we have at the moment, which has a councillor majority that is strongly in favour of inaction and timidity and doing nothing and failing our community when it comes to action on climate change. And there's only so much that the minority of us who do want to do something can do to move that needle when it comes to that the councillors influencing how these documents are made. I do want to point out that I think the officers have done really good work, and they have to navigate the divisions on council and the mix of people who have ambition for our community to be improved and for us to mitigate the negative effects of climate change as much as possible, and of course those councillors who don't care and just don't believe we should be doing anything. I find these documents personally disappointing in terms of their lack of ambition. What I really wanted to push for, and Councillor Nyagui asked a bit about how councillors have influenced the creation of this document, and I've consistently said from the very beginning that I want us to have science-based targets. I want the science to be telling us what is it we need to do locally to achieve the things we need to achieve. But that's not what these targets are. These targets are politically constrained targets based on the fact that the majority of our council doesn't want to do these things, which is a real shame because we know that the community supports action on climate change, that voters overwhelmingly back candidates at state and federal level who support action on climate change, and indeed pretty much everyone who ran for council at the last council election at least paid some level of lip service to it. They know that they need to in this area because that's what voters want. It's a real shame to see that not reflected once people are on council. But it just goes to show just how out of touch with the community this council is on this issue and so many others. And just another issue where our council continues to tell the community one thing while we're doing another. Our community actually has a lot of faith in council. They trust that we're doing the right thing. They see us creating these plans. They see us saying all the things that we're going to be doing. So we're doing that and we're talking the talk, but we're absolutely not walking the walk. And that other shoe is going to drop for the community soon, and they're going to realise they can't trust this council to deliver on these things. We can say all the right things as much as we want, but in the end, we're going to be judged on what we do, and we're going to be doing a whole lot of nothing if we continue down this track. Having said all of that, given the makeup of the current council, given the challenges in place ahead of anybody who wants to do something about climate change on this council, I'm going to have to vote for this just to get something, just to get some kind of action, and then hope that we can actually come back and review this with a future council who cares about this issue and see what we can do then.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Can I propose 2 amendments to be taken separately,
yes,
please, Mayor?
Please. What are your amendments?
So my first amendment...
No, 2 separately, so we're doing one at a time?
Yes,
Let's do one at a
please.
time, but just do your first one, please.
So the first amendment adds an additional clause to clause 3.2 of the officer's recommendation, which, if I can read it off my screen, hopefully I've got it right. We add, with the inclusion of a table that summarises all indicators and targets in the climate emergency plan.
Great. I'll second that. Thank you.
Now, in speaking to that, when you read the climate emergency plan on page 7, which I'm going to try and open, there's a table that's headed "How to Read This Plan," and in the table it talks about that there's a table summarising all indicators and targets referred to in the climate emergency plan is going to appear at the end of the document. Now, that table doesn't appear. Now, I'm not perhaps quite as pessimistic as Councillor Baxter, although I am mildly pessimistic about what's in our plan, because when I started going back and trying to look at what's in the climate emergency plan, going back to Act and Adapt, urban forest strategy and so on, there's actually a fair bit there, but it doesn't seem to be linked in together and all turn up in an easy-to-read format. And as one of the speakers mentioned earlier, without that summary table, it's quite hard to interpret what we're doing. I'm hopeful that if our officers can collect all those strategies that we have that are referred to elsewhere in the Climate Emergency Action Plan and take those strategies and their targets and timelines, which are set out in other places, e.g. in Act and Adapt, e.g. in an urban forest strategy, then the document will look a little bit more, not quite as pessimistic as my colleagues have said, perhaps still not what some of us would like, but I think we'll give people a far better idea of what we are doing here in Port Phillip. Hopefully there'll be some pleasant surprise that we're doing a little bit more than they thought we were doing. Perhaps they'll be a little disappointed there's a lot more that we can do, but at least all the documentation will be there and centralised. So we're not asking officers to come up with anything new, to come up with any new numbers, any new strategies, any new figures. It's simply taking the information that's already in the draft Climate Emergency Action Plan and its ancillary documents, e.g. Act and Adapt, and putting in a table at the end of the document that makes it very, very clear what our Climate Emergency Action Plan is all about. And at that stage, our public can look at us and say, well, yes, we should have done more. These are the things that are missing, but at least they'll be in a far better position to judge if there are gaps, what those gaps are, and perhaps to then argue that we should fill those gaps, because at the moment it's very, very difficult to see where those gaps are, the way the document's written. So I hope councillors will support this amendment so that when the document does come out, it will give anyone who reads our Climate Emergency Action Plan a pretty good idea of exactly what it's about. Whether it's to their satisfaction or not, at least it'll give them a very clear idea about what this council has approved.
Thank you. I'll add that I think it's very important to summarise in a table format how this document is easily read. That was a comment tonight that this is a challenging document for the community maybe to absorb, and this will be an easy way for that information to be conveyed. I'll support it. Anybody else speaking to the amendment? Let's go to the vote then on this amendment, only the red item there. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
And can I put up a second amendment, please, Mayor?
Yes.
And that's to add an additional paragraph 3.6 in the officer's recommendation, which is that Council directs the CEO or delegate to conduct a desktop review as part of the 25-26 annual budget process and consider changes to the Act and Adapt Sustainable Environmental Strategy 23-28 and the Climate Emergency Action Plan to address climate-related technology changes and changes to state and federal government policies.
Thank you. I'll also second that. Thank you.
And in speaking to this, climate change moves very, very quickly. You've only got to go and look at where the sea level is now and where it was 5 years ago. When you, every time you read reports in the paper, you see that the long-term scenarios are becoming gloomier and gloomier. But we're also seeing that there are new scientific strategies coming on board that allow us to measure the effect of climate change. For example, we're far better now at mapping what's happening with our Antarctic ice sheets so that we're in a far better position to judge exactly what's going on and exactly how urgent any changes are. Secondly, our governments at state and federal level are probably a little bit more on song with dealing with our climate emergency than we are as a council just at the moment. And they'll be changing targets that we as a council will probably need to respond to as well. Last but not least, we've heard a number of people in the gallery today make suggestions that they're not entirely happy with some of the things in this document, and they're entitled to make those comments. If there's going to be a review in 12 months' time of this document, it gives those people who weren't entirely pleased with what we're putting up tonight an opportunity to make recommendations to councillors and provide advice to council officers on things that could be done as part of a review. Now, it may well be that in 12 months' time, the council of the day decides that we've got everything right and there's no need to change. There's been no development in scientific evidence and there's been no change in government policy. Or it could be that a whole lot has changed in the next 12 months. By including this clause in the motion, we give ourselves the option of reacting to any of those situations so that we can be seen as being as proactive as possible, because, as has been suggested, this document's been a while in its development. There are some people who would suggest that the momentum isn't really there for our council doing things, and that may not necessarily be correct. When we read the summary that we've just agreed to put into the motion, things may be better than we thought. But at least we'll have the opportunity to react within 12 months, and no one can then suggest that this council's lacking any momentum in dealing with the impact of climate change. So I urge you to support the amendment, and then I'll speak in favour of the amended motion if this gets up.
I'm going to ask some clarifying questions real quick. So can this be done under business as usual or additional cost?
Through you, Mayor, I believe in discussions with officers, as provided it's a desktop review, we can do it within existing resources.
Great. And another clarifying question, would this result in a report to councillors, and would that report ever be public to a public report?
Through you, Mayor, yes, it would be a report to councillors, and yes, it would be a public report.
Excellent. Councillor Baxter, you were
clarifying question, yeah. It says that through the annual budget process. Now, obviously, in that year, the new council will also be developing the council plan. Should the wording include that, or is that unnecessary?
Through you, Mayor, I think it's unnecessary because it'll happen concurrently.
Yep. Cool. Good to confirm.
No need to change it? Okay. All right, then I'll speak to it. I will be supporting this. I think it's an opportunity to make sure we're on the same right path as things are evolving quickly. New council, this will be a good opportunity also to report back to the community publicly. I think that the people in the room are very interested in it, as well as more people in our community. So I'll be supporting this. Anybody else speaking to this amendment? What's on the screen? No? We'll go to the vote. All those in favour of this amendment? All those against? All right, that passes.
Division?
Okay. Let me find the room in my paper. All those in favour? Okay, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Martin, Councillor Consolo, Councillor Nyagri, and all those against? Councillor Bond, Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Pearl, and Councillor Clark. That passes. Thank you. So now we have two amendments to go into the substantive. We've already had Crawford speak to it and Baxter speak to it. So who would like to speak to it next? Are we ready to go in the vote? Okay. So this is on the... Oh, sorry. Would you like to... Okay. All right. Let's get... Councillor Nyagri to speak to the substantive.
I don't know what to say on this, honestly. I think certainly when I was running for council, I was thinking about every aspect of local government and how we can respond to climate change. I don't think there's any issue really that I worry about more that causes me to lose sleep more. It's got a profound impact on the entire planet. It certainly has a profound impact on Port Phillip. People often ask what the kind of role of local government is in this space, and obviously we don't, we can't suddenly transition everybody off coal. We can't make houses not use gas anymore. There's lots of things that we can't do, but there are lots of things that we can do, and I think it's important that we as a council focus on all those things, that we increase canopy cover across our municipality, that we stop using fossil fuels in our own buildings, that we find all the kind of initiatives and ideas that we can and we push them to the max. I don't think this document does that. I don't think that's one particular person's failing. I could certainly say sorry for myself, but I do ultimately want to say sorry, because although I'll vote for this document, I am deeply unhappy with it. I think council officers, as I think they've kind of articulated, and I don't want to verbal them, but ultimately they have to respond to the councillor group, and I don't think the councillor group were super clear, or certainly weren't unanimous in their feelings about this report and this work. Some are very keen not to spend any additional money, not to spend any additional resources on doing anything. Others are keen to do a lot more. And when you have a group like that that are in vigorous disagreement about what we should do, this is what you get. You get a report that sort of does a bit of this and a bit of that, but isn't going to be radically doing anything in either direction. So, I mean, I have to support this because I couldn't live with myself if we spent another year trying to write a report or if we didn't have a plan in place at all. But I'm not very happy with where we've landed in the end. I've certainly personally found this document difficult to comprehend in part. I think the decision, which I gather was by Council Oars before I was elected, to do 2 documents was a poor one. I think it makes it difficult for our community to comprehend. I continue to find the term act and adapt rather than simply calling it the sustainability strategy frustrating. I think it's just another example of us using language that makes it difficult for the community to kind of penetrate what we're doing. But there are also lots of good things here. Our council should be very proud. We are currently carbon neutral. We got involved in the renewable energy project a number of years ago, which I congratulate the councils of the former council for doing. We, despite the fact that many municipalities have lost canopy cover, we've managed to slightly increase it. Is that enough? Absolutely not. We need to do way, way more. But we are doing many good things in many areas. And there'll be a lot of good things that will come out of this report. But if, like me, you think this is an emergency, that our very presence on this planet is at stake, then and you want me to say that this is the report that's going to deliver the action that you need, then no. And not that we could ever fix it on our own, but is it the case that we as a community, as a group of councillors, came together and did absolutely everything we could? We left nothing on the table. We made every decision we could to do absolutely everything that we felt was needed to deliver what we needed? Then no. But as I say, I will vote in favour of this. And look, when I fast forward to 2050, and I'll be 59 then, still in the workforce with many, many years ahead of me, and so I often think about what the last third of my life will be like when we have theoretically addressed climate issues, and the kind of planet that will be left at that point. And I think we'll look back and we'll go, gee, there were a lot of opportunities missed, those extra little things that we lost because we didn't go quite as fast as we should, the people that had to suffer, the animals, the trees that got lost, that'll all be really frustrating. And I wish that some of my colleagues and others who probably won't be around then and maybe are not that concerned about it and are more concerned about their rate bill now would think forward that far, but they don't and they won't. So this is what we're left with. We're left with a plan that is better than nothing, but not brilliant or magical or anything. So, as I say, I'll be voting in favour of this, but I cannot understate how unhappy I am about where we are at.
All right. Councillor Clerk.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't really recall so many negative views in briefings about this strategy document, but it's interesting to hear all of my fellow councillors' strong views now. I think, given cost of living crisis, there's probably many of our residents who do need to worry about their rates and how they're going to pay their bills, and probably more immediate concerns than in 50 years' time. That's not to say it's not a concern. Act and Adapt strategy is proposing a spend of $42 million. That is an eye-watering $8.4 million per year for the next 5 years, of which approximately $12 million is budgeted for, so about $30 million unbudgeted. One of the speakers talked about the plan being for the community, and I strongly agree with that. I think the broader community, as opposed to the special interest groups, would be alarmed to see a budget of $42 million being proposed here. And based on the speakers I've heard tonight, there's not much support for this strategy at all. And given the feedback for the proposals came from only 31 people, this clearly doesn't have broader community engagement or support. I find myself agreeing with Councillor Baxter about this strategy being out of touch. One speaker even suggested that we shouldn't be funding our sporting fields and we should spend more money other than the proposed $42 million and alienate the rest of the community who all play sport across all sorts of age groups in our community, and it's an activity that we thoroughly encourage for people to get better health outcomes and social involvement. So I think, perhaps the feeling about the strategy that's been reflected tonight from the speakers and some of the councillors is because it's so broad. I can see council officers have tried to keep it quite open-ended, but for some, maybe that's hard to determine exactly what will be delivered. Personally, I feel a better strategy would be to have focused on much smaller action list that can deliver practical outcomes that's within council's remit, as opposed to report writing, investigating things that council has no need to be involved with nor remit, overlapping with state government programs or different levels of government, and creating probably far too many action items, of which I think there's 45 in there, many of which, as a result, will most likely never be delivered. Suggestions of paying for solar upgrades to property owners' houses. We've got a proposal to spend $19 million on lowering greenhouse gases, which might be a great aim, but as Australia is only 1.2% of global emissions, it's hard to see how that $19 million is good value for the ratepayer. And I think there are some good initiatives in there, which was pleasing to see. Street lighting upgrades, LED implementations, water initiatives, diversion of waste from landfill have all been good initiatives from council, but others I don't think are well focused or targeted by council or council resources. I think in good faith I can't support a strategy that doesn't provide good return for the hard-earned ratepayers' money with a cost of living crisis, and we as councillors are charged with looking at a balance across the whole community. And this community requires aged care, childcare, sporting fields, funding for the arts, funding for our roads and maintenance, and a million other things that we have a very tight budget for that are very difficult to fund and balance that up. So across all of the competing priorities, I don't feel this strategy is appropriate, and I won't be supporting it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to this item tonight? Councillor Bond?
Yeah, I was a little bit disturbed earlier when I heard a speaker from the audience say that we should stop spending money on sporting fields, which is the core business of council, and start spending more money on items like this. When I ran for election, sporting fields was what the community told me they wanted. They wanted us to improve our current playing surfaces. They want more sporting fields. They want us to upgrade their pavilions. They want us to improve facilities for female sport in order to capture the participation or the increase in participation of female sport that's occurred across our municipality over the last 5 or 6 years. So that's what my community is telling me, and that's what I will continue to focus on. As I said, it was rather disturbing to say that we should stop spending money on sporting fields. It's just, probably highlights some people's priorities and how they are just not in step with the rest of the community that speak to me anyway. So I won't be supporting this, and I will be concentrating on sporting fields from now on.
Thank you. Can we keep going to the next speaker? Anybody else speaking to the item? If not, I will. Sorry, you had your hand up. Go ahead, Christina.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of strategies to address clean air, clean water and open spaces, but what particularly concerns me in this report is the financial commitment of what we are voting on tonight, and that is the budget costs which are found at the end of Attachment 1 and not found in the body of the motion. Attachment 1 lists the 5 cost estimates for implementation of the draft strategy. I won't go through them, but basically they add up to a staggering $42 million to address the strategy and likely to blow out over the next 5 years. This $42 million is only mentioned in Attachment 1 and should be front and centre in the body of the motion and transparent to the public who would be paying for this. So I find this a great disappointment. So that if people were reading this motion, they would have no idea what's buried at the end of Attachment 1. As well, reading the actions under the 5 goals, some common keywords are words like review, investigate and develop business cases. I would hope that these processes are part of the day-to-day business as usual issues that Council is addressing when they're looking at all of the things that we've been implementing as part of the Act and Adapt strategy, such as with the 41,000 trees that have already been planted, along with 35,000 Indigenous plants along the foreshore. There's other things like as Councillor Clark has already mentioned, with the mitigation of flood zones, mitigation of when we're looking at rain gardens, filtering and cleaning of the water from rainfall, and also sweeping through those rain gardens. So Council has been addressing multiple issues which are in the report. More funding is also being sought out under paragraph 410 of the motion. In addition to the 23-24 council budget of $345,000 for an Act and Adapt implementation and a $90,000 for community sustainable programs, this motion states, and I quote, "Delivery of the recommended final draft strategy requires maintenance of this level of annual funding." I take this to mean an ongoing annual funding of $435,000 at least, but no information on the amount allocated from this is whether it goes to report writing versus practical outcomes. Instead, we should be directing funding on practical and tangible outcomes, planting 10 times the 41,000 trees so that we can increase canopy cover from 17 to 30%, which has been addressed through the urban forest strategy, which we had over the past last week, a few weekends. Council presented reports on what we can do there to address increasing canopy, which will also provide more cooling and removal of carbon emissions, replacing more street lighting with LEDs and also providing more lighting in streets for safety at night. More rain gardens for filtering pollutants and addressing rainfall mitigation. More mitigation of flood-prone areas. More diversion of FOGO waste from landfill as we roll it out to the apartment buildings across our city. Increasing our electrified vehicle fleet. And also, most important, Council engaging with purchasing more open space across our municipality. And this addresses what Councillor Bond was saying. These are the sports fields where we would like to have all of our residents walking across, enjoying the outdoor, breathing fresh air, enjoying taking their dogs for a walk. Everybody playing sport, young and the old, children, males and females. This is what we should be doing: more open space, more footy grounds, more soccer grounds, more cricket grounds. We've got to be spending that $42 million on practical outcomes and not more of this report writing. Report which I remember on occasions where Councillor Bond has also said, we just fill our shelves with more reports and they collect dust. So the strategy here should be delivering more practical outcomes and things that we can see, more tangible things. So I will not be supporting this motion when this draft strategy is considering a staggering budgetary cost of $42 million plus a further annual $440,000. And I agree, it is not an easy report to read and what the practical outcomes are.
Thank you. Excuse me, in the gallery, if you could also just... we can hear your whispering. Thank you.
Could I ask some clarification of officers, Mayor?
You can ask a clarifying question.
There seems to be some confusion around the budget for this, these two strategies. Could council officers clarify whether the $42 million is to write further reports, whether any of that money is existing funding that's just being calculated as part of this work, and whether any of that $42 million would include things like planting trees, replacing street lighting, purchasing new electric vehicles?
Good question. Brian, are you taking that?
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, the $42 million consists of essentially a number of projects, including the urban forest strategy, which is about $3 million in there, which is the project that's underway at the moment, the South Melbourne sustainability strategy, the transmission to lower vehicles, so our council moving to electric vehicles. It funds the energy efficient lighting upgrades and the ongoing stormwater infrastructure maintenance. We did have a look, and there is a percentage, I think, of that funding which is allocated to matters which are not sort of project deliveries, and I'm just looking for that figure now, but it was about 1.6% of that. 4.2 million is for the development of strategies and other investigations.
Just to clarify, it's 1.6% or 1.6 million?
Just want to... Sorry, I'm just looking for the figure now. It was a percentage. I just want to make sure I've got that percentage right, Councillor. Do we have it there?
Why don't I go see if there's another speaker and we'll come back to that answer. Is that okay? All right, Councillor Martin, do you speak to it?
Another clarifying question, if that's okay. Following on from Councillor Nyagi's question, I'm a little confused as to how our budgeting process operates. Is this figure of approximately $42 million something that's already included in our forward estimates, or is this something new that we haven't heard of before that we're going to vote on tonight? Because if we are and we're committing $42 million we've never allocated to anywhere else, I would have thought that the only way that we could do this would be through the annual budget process if there were any additional funds to be spent. So I suppose, yeah, is the money that we're talking about here money that's already committed in the forward estimates? If not, could this council, through the motion that we've got on the table tonight, actually commit the council to spending 10 cents, 100 million, whatever, or would this something could only happen through the annual budget process?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, and I thank you for the time. I've just confirmed it's 1.8% of the $42 million is for the further development of strategies and investigations. In terms of the other question, Mayor, that's been raised, the report tonight in terms of the $42 million does not ask council, doesn't recommend council authorisation of that. That funding is been already allocated through budget processes, either for this financial year or in the forward budget estimates. The only additional funding that is suggested that be considered for next financial year relates to the ESD trial, the Environmental Sustainable Standards trial, and indeed an increased funding for our water-sensitive urban design water gardens to meet increased costs that come through there. All the other funding is either already approved in the budget or is in future budget allocations.
Thank you. Did you have it? Oh, okay, hold on.
So just to be really clear, the only additional funding that outside of what's been approved by all the councillors already is for the Worsled's additional funding and the ESD officer, and everything else has already been approved in the normal budget process by all the councillors, and that the only money out of that 42 million that is being spent on reports is 1.8% of that total figure.
Can I just add just one clarification that currently the Act and Adapt funding, which is 435, expires at the end of this financial year, so it does require a continuation of that funding, which will be an additional funding request from the budget. It's not in the forward estimates, but other than that, that's right.
All right, back to you, Councillor Martin. You were asking a clarifying question, but are you ready to speak to it?
I'm happy to speak to the substantive motion, and firstly can I thank the councillors for approving the two amendments that I've put up, and as my clarifying questions have indicated, we're not committing the council spending any additional money at all if this motion is successful tonight. What it does is a recommendation of a very, very small addition to the annual budget, which council will be considering next year for two areas here, which Mr Tees explained. So we're not talking about finding $42 million from nowhere. We're talking about a six-figure sum that may or may not be included by the council in the annual budget process. So in terms of the financial discussions, I think we've been talking about some furphies for the last few minutes. In terms of the actual motion itself, I'm pleased that I think it's a little bit stronger than it was when we first entered the chamber. I think the two amendments, are going to make it much easier for our community to see what we are doing, what we have done, and what we're planning to do, and they can make judgments as to whether that's satisfactory or not. And given the rapid pace of change in the way that we're able to keep up with the science with climate science, and given the rapid changes at state and federal legislative levels, the fact that if this motion is successful, we're able to review what we're doing in 12 months' time and perhaps change targets if the state and federal governments have changed, perhaps change targets if we're suddenly aware there are far more significant issues in terms of ice flows disappearing, who knows. We're giving ourselves that flexibility, and in fact it may well be that the next council might want to make this a document that could be reviewed every 12 months as we continually react to the rather horrific things that we see happening in our community as a result of climate change. So I don't think, unfortunately, that we're looking at a whole lot more than simply reiterating that we're approving business as usual at the moment. If we don't pass this, even the business as usual disappears and we're doing nothing. So I urge you to at least pass this motion tonight so we can at least continue the good things that we've done already. And that gives us some time to look and see, are there some other things that we might want to do? Does the science indicate we need to do more? And we can make those decisions further down the track. So really, really disappointed if this doesn't get up, because we'd be turning our back on a whole lot of fantastic work that our council has done in the past. But not entirely happy with everything that's in the document, but at least we have the opportunity to make some changes further down the track if we pass this document this evening.
Thank you. Final speaker is this? I'll go ahead. Yes, it's obviously not going to be unanimous, but there is majority support, so I think statements otherwise are misleading. And there's been, 4 people against it, 4 people kind of slagging the report not being good enough. I acknowledge that there could be more done, but I think that this is a really good strategy and action plan. And the officers have worked really hard on it. There's quite a load of actions. I didn't feel this deep upset or this passion for big changes or anything along the way. I think we should focus on mitigation. Reports and strategies are a big part of it. We have to be able to communicate what we've done, what we're planning to do, what we communicate to the community, what we strive to do. that's part of it. We have to do reports and strategies. But yes, the big focus should be on what we can do for mitigation, because I do believe in climate change and that we can do more to do it. This is a good start. It does sit with other levels of government and a lot to do with the private citizens and what they do in their own property. And the more we can encourage people to get on board, there are so many initiatives and actions out there. It's all this positive forward momentum that we all can play a part in. So I will be supporting this tonight, and I'll offer Councillor Crawford, she'd like to close on this.
Yeah, I've got I'm not very, it'll be a bit of a disjointed speech. Just wanted to bring us back to a really interesting thing. I just looked up the Local Government Act 2020, which does ask us, as part of our requirement, to address climate change. But the thing that I'd like to encourage us to use the word community. Municipal community, that's what we're elected to represent, not ratepayers. It makes us sound like there's a second-class citizen if you're a resident or someone who works here. We're actually elected to make decisions for the benefit and well-being of a municipal community or district. So I'd like to kind of be more inclusive. It's not just about one group of people we're making decisions on behalf of. I think that often it's residents or renters or workers are just not counted in this room. So I'd like to encourage us to get back to that as a concept and why we're here to make decisions. Now, it's not the document, obviously, that I think many people or any people in the room wanted, but we are where we are. I still think there's a lot of opportunity to work together. I know there's not an advisory committee, but I think through PCAN and the various bodies and the Eco Centre, I think there's still opportunity to get advice and use that. And in a year's time, or over a year's time, have that review and set up something. We don't want to waste people's time in the meantime anyway, so we can still do what we're doing right now and use the Eco Centre perhaps as a conduit right at this moment in time. I do note that there is, the thing that frustrates me, and we all do it, we all use things to our political benefit, but there's never a good reason or time or process to support anything progressive for some of my colleagues. It just seems the price tag is the only thing that matters. And that's a really frustrating place to be. Sometimes it has to be beyond what you think and what is for the broader good. And maybe, I've been sitting here listening to debate, maybe we should have had pushed for the most ambitious thing we could because they were going to vote it down anyway. Now, we all had opportunity. This lands on all of us, though. We all had opportunity to suggest better actions or less strategy or simplification. That's on all of us, guys. We were in the room. So we do take responsibility. But we are, and as I said, I would urge everyone to pass it tonight so we can move forward. We can get some of these actions underway. We want to deliver core council business, depending on who you ask what that core could be. But there's the opportunity, like when we're doing more open spaces, we put tanks underneath it to capture water runoff, to be able to water those fields in those droughts that we know are coming. We can do more sustainable, more climate-friendly core business. When we create female-friendly change rooms, well, we make sure that if there are possible, low-carbon materials, or we bring in a policy that every new council building has to have its own battery and solar panel. There are ways within what we're currently doing to make better decisions in this space, and it doesn't have to actually be in the document. So I think there's still real opportunity. So we can focus on what we're doing now and just look at low carbon or sustainable options. That's not excluded by my passing this or delivering this documentation. So I think there's still real opportunity. FOGO coming online to all our MUDs in the next couple of months. There's a huge, opportunity in terms of what's going to landfill. So there are big and small ways separate to this document that we can really look to focus on. And maybe it's about having conversations with our colleagues at the Retrofit Melbourne, the City of Melbourne, see how that goes and how we can loop our businesses in there. There's also big things like the safeguard mechanism coming on board, and there's some other really big things. So I think there's opportunity that we just can't see yet. So I guess where it comes back to is politics is the art of the possible. And I guess this is what's possible right now in this moment. It doesn't mean it's forever. It just means in this moment. So I urge you to pass this right now and let's look for what's possible for our the benefit and well-being of our municipal community. And it's also under the Act for future generations. So I look forward to working with you and councillors and officers on what we can do in the future on this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Thank you for closing. We will now take it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That passes.
Get a division, please, mate.
All right. All those in favour? Hold on, I think I used my other hand. Crawford, Baxter, Martin, Consolo, and Nyagri. Against? Clark, Bond, Sirkoff. All those abstaining? Councillor Pearl. Thank you. All right, I need to propose a 10-minute break. So what time do we actually have? Oh, I'll round it to a time. So a 7-minute break. We're coming back at 8:50. Thank you. All right, we're on to 11.2. This is the Urban Forest Strategy Strategic Directions. Do councillors have any questions of the officers in relation to this report? Councillor Nyagri?
Just following on from our previous conversation, is some of the $42 million that was mentioned in the climate plan related to this, and is there additional funding that this will need beyond that $42 million?
Oh, Dana.
Through you, Mayor. The funding for this project is currently within a Greening Port Phillip project, capital project funding, which is a reoccurring funding a budget item each year.
See you.
Through you, Mayor, as you further work through the options, at the moment we're doing strategic direction setting, as you further work through the options with the urban forest strategy, you will be presented with different scenarios and outcomes which will have different price tags, so you'll make decisions as on final funding as part of that process, but there is a base level of funding ongoing. I think it's around 600,000 or 700,000 per year. Dana?
Yes, that's correct. It's around 700,000 a year.
Any further questions?
It's just probably around the timelines with this project. Obviously, we're sort of using Greening Port Phillip as the document to guide our planting at the current time. When do we sort of see ourselves using this document as the, I guess, guiding force? When would the first trees and shrubs be planted, guided by this document as opposed to the existing framework?
Is it Dana?
Through you, Mayor, this is due to be adopted early next financial year, well, around April next calendar year. And while we're developing this, we're also alongside it developing a new street tree planting guide, and that guide will then inform our future planting for our Greening Port Phillip program.
Thank you. Any further questions? Otherwise, councillors, we have an officer's report. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Nyagri to move it. Who would like to second it? Councillor Crawford. Okay, Councillor Nyagri, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, this one gets me very excited. I think it's a brilliant document. I really congratulate officers on. I think it's always easier when you're doing something very specific, right? But I remember speaking against Greening Port Phillip many years ago in the community. I think a few people in the room would probably remember me coming and speaking that night because I didn't feel it was ambitious enough and didn't meet the needs. I'm really excited with the work that officers have been doing. I think we've really drawn upon a number of really well-credentialed consultants and others in the field, have communicated and engaged with the community in a really comprehensive way, and I'm very encouraged by the process so far. I can only hope that continues and that we end up with a really excellent document at the end.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford?
I'm actually going to use this moment. I think I'm very similar. And trees are pretty and provide amenity, so they're a lot more, and then a lot more tangible, which is a very wonderful thing. And the long-term historical planting of our city has left us in a good state. So this is like looking to the next, generation of trees. I just want to dispel a myth that's out there in the yonder universe of the municipality, we are not, under this plan, going to cut down all of the plane trees in Elwood in the next 8 years. We are looking to diversify for species resilience when trees reach end of life, to perhaps look at other alternatives like the maple, which is very similar in traits and character and qualities as the plane tree. But there is no plans to remove all of the plane trees in Elwood in the next 8 years. I just urge people to read the strategy, and that is not state... What was that, sorry? Or any other, yes, let's clarify, anywhere in the municipality. I just want to put that to bed.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? Councillor Bond?
Yeah, just say I was pleased to see that they'd included all the common tree names in the report. It made it so much easier to read and work out what is happening in our municipality as far as our tree canopy and tree plantings and tree cover is concerned, now that I know which tree is which.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to it? No, I'll add, I think not all trees are created equally in the fact that we have some that are established in areas that people come into us and said, can you change these trees? So the forward planting really matters for future generations, and the quantity, the increase is going to be excellent. So I think that we spent a lot of time making sure that these strategic directions are well informed by our community with great engagement, and I will be supporting this. Thank you. Let's go. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sirikoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to add a really small point, but probably it's very important to some parts of the community and also the business advisory group, where with the planting of any of the trees, especially in say along Beaconsfield Parade or Carlisle Street, where residents have spoken, and the BAG group, about consistency in plantings, so we don't just put in a higgledy-piggledy range of trees, so it doesn't create any uniformity of the street. And in fact, we should be providing something that is harmonious with the street and doesn't look like we've just chucked in anything here and there to put some greenery in. So if we do focus on the type of tree plantings, and it is an attractive outcome along any of the streets with a focus on a theme of tree. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Niagri, would you like to close?
Just to say, I think we should start phasing out plane trees, but that's not a process of suddenly cutting them all down. It's a process of, through this document, considering alternative trees that have a similar amenity, an aesthetic appeal, and over time replacing them and planting new ones. That's going to be a really tricky transition because we don't want to remove all the trees in one go, but we also don't want to have a situation, as Councillor Sirikoff alluded to, where we have a weird mix of trees in a particular street. It's one of many, many dilemmas that we face as a council, which will be worked through in this process.
Thank you. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That passes unanimous. Thank you. All right, now on to 12.1. This is Love My Place 23-24, recommendations for the 2023-24 grant projects. Councillor Niagri.
I'm declaring a general conflict of interest in relation to item 12.1, Love My Place 2023-2024 recommendations for the 2023-2024 grants projects. I have a close association with one of the grant applicants, and I will leave the meeting as this item is now being considered. I also wanted to note that I was the councillor representative on this panel, and I did not participate in the consideration of this grant as part of my role on the panel.
Thank you. I note that Councillor Niagri is leaving the room. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to this item? Councillor Sirikoff.
Thank you, Mayor. As a part of anybody who receives a grant, are they required to provide, at the end of delivering their project, an acquittal of how the money was spent?
Adele Dennison, are you online?
I am. Through you, Mayor. Yes, all grant recipients are required to provide an acquittal report at the conclusion of the project.
Thank you. I also want to remind councillors that the attachment to this is confidential. So when you're speaking to it, please remember that. All right. Any further questions? Otherwise, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Bond to move. Thank you. Who would be seconding this tonight? Councillor Sirikoff. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak to it? No. Councillor Sirikoff? No. Anybody else speaking to this item tonight? All right. I'll add, these grants are exciting. There's many that come in, and when it is public knowledge, I think people will be delighted to see what has been selected, and that'll come in time. So please try to, attend the things that are in this recommendation tonight. All right. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. If someone could get Councillor Niagri, please. Thank you. Welcome back. We have 13.1, the adoption of the election period policy. Are there any questions of the officers in relation to this item? No. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Bond to move. Councillor Martin to second. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak to it? No. Councillor Martin, are you speaking to it? Anybody else speaking to it? All right. Good luck if you're running in the election. We all know what this is going to... It outlines what's allowed from anybody in this room or anybody in the community who will be running. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. On to 13.2. This is Councillor Expenses Monthly Reporting for September 2023. Any questions of the officers in relation to this report? No. Oh, Councillor Niagri?
Just to quickly clarify, I'm assuming that the money in my expenses relating to the conferences was my attendance to the MAV conference.
Sorry, Head of Governance?
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. It'll be the MAV Gala and Service Awards.
Thank you. All right. If no one's speaking in this, someone's looking for... someone to move this? Councillor Martin, Councillor Niagri to second. Councillor Martin speaking to it. Councillor Niagri. Anybody else? Councillor Niagri, yeah, you want to?
I just always like to point out when I have big items in my thing that I attended the MAV State Council, the MAV Conference and the MAV Gala as councillor delegate last month, and that's what that item's about. But I already made a report about that previously, so I won't go on anymore.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? If not, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. And last is 13.3. This is record of informal meetings of council. Any questions of the officers in relation to the item? No? All right. Looking for someone to move this. Councillor Bond and Councillor Sirikoff to second. Thank you. Councillor Bond speaking to it. Councillor Sirikoff, you speaking to it. Anybody else speaking to this? Let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right, that's the end of the presentation of reports. On to notice of motions. Councillors, we have no notice of motions tonight. On to 15 is reports by councillor delegates. Councillors, do we have any reports by councillor delegates? No, we'll keep moving. Urgent items of business. Councillors, do you have any urgent items of business? No. Then I need to read about the confidential matters. Councillors, we have two confidential reports listed on the agenda, being 17.1, Section 15 Legal Agreement. This is the Dank Street Tram Substation. And we have 17.2, which is aged care reforms. I now call upon a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to the members of the public to consider confidential items. Thank you, Councillor Bond. And who is seconding this? Councillor Sirikoff. Thank you. I'll now put that to the motion. That motion to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. Councillors, we will now conclude the public part of the meeting. I advise members of the public that there are no further open items to be discussed. This will be the conclusion of the public meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight.